Welcome to 13.3, Mining Impacts and Regulations. We talked briefly previously about your cell phones and how there was a large amounts of metals and minerals just contained in that little device. So if you look at the numbers, they're staggering. There are about $314 million worth of metals contained in unused cell phones in the United States alone. So these are not the ones that we're currently using, but ones that are like laying around in your homes. So please recycle those cell phones. So when we were talking about mining, I said that they had a lot of ecological impact. That's what we're going to be focusing on in this lecture. When mining occurs, obviously there's increased erosion because they're removing all the vegetation in the area that the mining is occurring, unless it's a tunnel mine. All right, and so that's going to cause a lot more erosion. Even when they replant, those small seedlings do not have the capability to hold the soil in place that a large tree does. So with this erosion, you're going to have much more sediment and debris clog waterways, which can then cause pollution in the water, right? Sedimentation in the water. The other thing that happens with a lot of this mining is this thing called acid drainage, and this is nasty, nasty stuff that comes from the mining process. And all that acid tends to not be captured and land up also into the waterways that are nearby that furthers the pollution. All the particulates that are put up in the atmosphere from things like blasting and just from the erosion of the land as that dust gets picked up causes further air pollution. And then if you're talking about undersea mining, of course, there's huge disruptions to the ocean ecosystem and especially our fragile coral reefs. There can also be social impacts associated with mining. If you are a private landowner and they are doing mining near your home, it can cause property damage on your private property. If you're a property owner and your home has a nice scenic mountaintop view and then they blow up the mountain, that can obviously affect the value of the land around that area where the mining is occurring. Or if they are doing tunnel mining under your property and a mine collapses at some point, even when it's left defunct over time and eventually collapses, that can damage your property, and then it's very difficult for the private landowner to come back and hold those mining companies accountable for that damage. So the good side of mining is that it can bring a lot of jobs and money into areas, especially areas with very poor socioeconomics. But with that can come a lot of fights over mineral rights for these and who owns the land and who has access to the minerals. And in some places, these fights could lead to violence. Mining in general is very hazardous to the health of miners. You would think that now with all of our safety measures in place and the technology that we have, that the amount of illnesses associated with mining would decrease, but that's actually not what we're seeing. So here, if you look at this graph, it shows what is happening to the health of our miners, especially with black lung disease, when they are spent mining how many years. And so if they're only mining for a few years, like up to 14 years, things have actually over time gotten better for miners if you look at those. But the long-term miners, actually things have gotten worse. So if you were a miner for 25 plus years, more of them are getting black lung at this point. All right, so things have actually gotten a little bit worse. Okay. And so if you're not sure what black lung looks like, so black lung happens because you're breathing in all these particulates, especially coal particulates. They get into your lungs, and over time it turns the lungs black, all right, and they get hard, and this makes it hard to breathe. And so people who have black lung typically have to have an oxygen tank when they get older, and sometimes they die from it. So how long you're exposed into those mines, and you can see only 10 years in the mine has profound effects on your lung tissue, the worse it is for the miner. So we do have regulations, though, that are in place to protect the health and well-being of our miners. So the first law was passed a long, long time ago in 1891. This established ventilation requirements for coal miners. So prior to that, as we saw in our mining video, they used to bring canaries down with them, and then when the canary died, they knew to get out. Luckily, they have come up with some better ways to ventilate the mines. They work okay. There's still places in the mine where it's not safe to be. And also prohibited miners under 12 years of age, which you would think would be a no-brainer, but back then, child labor was very common, and these small kids were desirable because they could crawl into tiny little shafts that the adults could not get into. So today, more recently, we have the Federal Mine Safety and Health Act of 1977 that regulates our mine safety and put in place further safeguards for miners. And in 2010, just to show that this stuff still happens, there was an underground explosion in West Virginia mine that killed 29 miners. All right, so even with all these safeguards in place, it is a very, very dangerous occupation. So here is our mining fatalities up to 2004. And so if you look at the fatalities, they have overall, the actual deaths have gone down, not the cases of black lung, but the deaths have gone down. And some of this has to do with like underground mines. We have less of these, and so it makes sense that these deaths have gone down. But we still have a significant number of fatalities occurring throughout the years due to this profession. And it seems the spread of how people are dying is similar as well. So what can we do to help? Well, one of the things is all these metals that have already been mined out of the ground need to be recycled, because the more of them we recycle, the less mining we need to do to get that resource, because these metals can be used over and over and over again. And that's why I kept harping on your cell phones. So minerals are non-renewable. There's only so many of them in the ground. And so as we run out of them, if they get lost in other places, then we have to go into more and more dangerous places to retrieve these. And it becomes less and less economically beneficial to mine them. And so then sometimes safeguards might go by the wayside. So we can either reduce our use of these minerals, make sure we reuse them and recycle them, especially those tin cans, that's a mineral. And that will reduce the need for mining and our issues with limited supply. So extracting aluminum ore takes 20 times more energy than obtaining it from recycled sources. So it just makes sense to recycle it, folks. So make good decisions out there. Bye.